take a look at these PCs. Now, without me saying anything, you know what they're for. Gaming. I mean, what gave it away? Was it the color, the sharp edges, the metal pipes? No, it was the lights, right? For 25 years, manufacturers have been designing very specific hardware for gamers. But in the last few years, we started to see a shift. And as gaming becomes more and more popular, some gaming gear is being designed for a broader appeal. Instead of PCs that scream, "I'm a gamer," these new machines look like they're for someone a little more adult. But how do we get that original gamer aesthetic to begin with? And with this big cultural shift, what's the future of gaming hardware going to look like?
The personal computer first kind of became an object in the consumer marketplace, let's say beginning in the late 70s, but really picking up steam in the early 80s. There was a lot of people didn't know what this thing was for. If you think about the ways that people imagined computers prior to that, it was huge mainframes that took up giant rooms. It was things like 2001: A Space Odyssey. The idea was that computers had always seemed foreign and exclusionary.
This is Lane Nooney, a professor of media studies at NYU, who was working on a book about early video game history. And according to her, you can't talk about the gamer aesthetic without talking about the computer history right at its point of inception.
There was a lot of effort put into the industrial design of these machines to figure out how to get the personal computer to look like something that belonged in the home. So you get that kind of moment of beige plastic.
The earliest personal computers and gaming consoles really tried to fit into your home and look like other appliances so people would feel comfortable. I mean, look at this Atari 2600 from 1982. For a lot of people, their first home computer wasn't a personal computer, it was a console, just like this. And it's kind of scary. It's got all these weird switches and this big port in the front for the cartridge, and then all these extra ports on the back for the controllers. This is kind of intimidating, made a little less intimidating by the wood paneling. And this need to be friendly wasn't just limited to the 80s. For 2 decades, manufacturers tried to make PCs look innocuous and nice. By this point, computers were really starting to be adopted into homes, finally. But they all looked like this, boring. Even at the turn of the century, computers made people nervous. Like, think about your parents or grandparents and how they feel about Alexa. It was the same thing.
What the hell is wrong with this blasted thing? Amanda!
Soft, smooth, plasticky design. These mainstream PCs of the time were designed to blend seamlessly into your home. And this design language is reflected in the Super Nintendo from the early 90s. The SNES was seeking out the same people who wanted to buy Mac and IBM clones, but other gaming companies weren't just trying to blend in.
If you think about the industrial design differences between the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, right? The Super Nintendo is a toy, right? And Nintendo knew that, and they marketed to that demographic of kind of 8 to 12-year-old boys, right? Sega went for a slightly older male demographic, right? They were trying to market to teenagers. And if you think about that black, slick, curved console, right? It looks like a mix of something from Star Trek meets Aliens, right? All of the design of it is meant to be aggressive, is meant to be different. And I think that's where we begin to pick up that kind of black plastic aesthetic. That mode of marketing becomes very effective in getting people to tie, particularly young men, to tie certain aesthetic decisions to their concept of what it means to be a gamer.
This thing feels dangerous and different. And while the console giants may have figured out what their brand looked like, the PC companies were taking a different path. Gamers started building their own rigs, and some smart companies soon joined them. To get a better understanding of that history, I spoke with Chris Garcia. He's been a curator at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California for the last 20 years.
We start seeing companies making gaming-focused rigs in the early 90s. There were several, and there were actually, you could find them advertised in the back of all the magazines. But then, you got a couple of significant ones in the mid-90s. That really changed everything. The biggest one is Alienware, of course.
This brings us to Frank Azor. He's worked at Alienware almost since its creation in 1996. He started out boxing up PCs in the storeroom, and now he's a vice president at Dell, which bought the company in 2006.
You try and remember PCs 20 or so years ago, everybody was really focused on reducing the cost because computers were very expensive at the time. We came in with an approach that said, hey, these things are kind of ugly. And everybody's like pulling features out and pulling technology and performance out. What if we did the complete opposite? What if we put the best performance into this thing and we actually made it look really, really cool?
Forget Sega coming for Nintendo. Alienware took on the entire PC industry up until that point. I mean, look at this compact. And now look at this, the Alienware Area 51. This thing is cool as hell. And like the Sega, it's also a little aggressive, a little scary looking.
Alienware makes computers that look like Alienware computers. What's really nice about what they have done is they have given an experience of their gaming that is not just the ability to deeply interact with the game, it's the ability to deeply interact with a device that is a definition of them as a gamer.
Alienware introduced its first really alien-looking computers in 2002 with the Area 51M laptop, in 2003 with the Area 51 Predator 1 desktop. In 2 years, it forced the industry and consumers to reconsider not just the desktop, which had a big community of gamers building their own wild PCs at home, but laptops, which until that point were either brutally average or Apple. And over the decade, others followed. Not just other companies who were bought by bigger companies and now live on as branding for corporations like HP and Asus, but even people at home building their own PCs. People building these things, including me, were nerds. When we weren't playing video games, we were watching movies with pretty similar plots. You know, space age, guns and ships and aliens, or disaffected computer lovers yearning for something more.
Tron had a massive effect because as we're seeing the generation that were buying PCs for their own in the early 90s, they were kids when you got Tron. They have this idea that, oh, the future has bright string lights.
Things like HAL, right, with the lights, right? Star Trek is an obvious case.
Tron's absolutely been an inspiration for our industrial design. We actually internally refer to it as Tron lighting.
Tron lighting is not just about loving the movie Tron. It's about the very core of this gamer aesthetic, setting yourself apart. Custom paint job or a line of piping is expensive. A couple of customizable LED strips are cheap, which is nice because an inexpensive LED strips make each gamer an individual. Their computer, like them, is special. Also loud, big, and intimidating for anyone who isn't just like you, a gamer. So what happens if you like playing games and don't want your computer looking like a spaceship?
When Razer came into the gaming space, I think there was already a gaming aesthetic out there, but it was not the one that we felt that was matching what we wanted, what we were expecting. From the beginning, purely from a design language perspective, we wanted something a little more minimal.
Stefan Blanchard is the director of design at Razer, and he's been there since 2006, a year after the company started, and when it was just making neat little peripherals. A big reason Razer stands apart from other gamer brands is because of him, which means he was also there when the Razer Blade laptop was introduced in 2011, 9 years after Alienware first made those wild-looking gaming laptops.
When we start going into the laptop business, there was already like big brand like Alienware. They were doing these very thick and powerful products, and we felt that it was not what we wanted. We wanted very thin but powerful. Everybody looked at us as like, you're crazy. You have no idea what you're talking about.
So compare the Razer Blade, even the one in 2011, to any of the Alienware laptops. They're pretty different, right? The Razer's pretty laid back and nothing like previous gaming laptops. There's no giant loud fans or exhausts, no wild colors. Even the lights are subtle and toned down. It's thin, relatively light. It's sacrificing just a little power for more approachability. Universal even. And with this new design language implemented by Razer in its laptops, we witnessed another transition. Gaming devices that were designed for the masses.
I mean, I think one of the things that we're learning from the bump in PC gaming that's been happening, certainly something that everyone's been paying attention to with the rise of mobile, is that gaming is more diverse, it's more plural, there's a much bigger audience for it than I think a lot of these companies were necessarily considering. Everyone's sort of becoming aware that gaming is the majority of the population does it. It's done across both genders, and for a lot of people it might be perceived as a hobby, or there's not necessarily this interest in that being the primary mode of identification, right?
Over 150 million Americans play games, but not every one of those people ascribe to the gamer identity. And if people aren't ascribing to that gamer identity, then the companies that cater to that identity need to step up and start making stuff for all those other people. Razer's willingness to sacrifice power for portability caught on at the right time. In 2011, laptop sales were at an all-time high. People wanted a device on the go. Companies noticed, in particular NVIDIA, which makes the graphics cards in nearly every single gaming laptop. A few years ago, NVIDIA realized it could push design forward, forcing laptop makers to consider thinner and more portable devices, Max-Q design. And rather than me explaining it, here's Mark Everman, Director of Product Management at NVIDIA.
What Max-Q is trying to solve is really the fundamental observation that gamers are people. And gamers want to be able to, of course, game on their laptop and have a fantastic gaming experience. But they also want a device that they can take with them for any of their needs. There's a ton of gamers out there who want a device that's both powerful and portable. So Max-Q is about solving that challenge.
NVIDIA put Max-Q out there to make these laptops smaller, more portable, and friendly. The idea is NVIDIA provides laptop makers with advice and guidelines, as well as specifically designed graphics cards, to make thinner laptops that will sacrifice a little power that most people won't miss in order to improve battery life, thermal demands, and just general portability. Not quite the 80s beige box, but something a little more approachable than this monster from Origin. This guy is about power, customization, identity. Max-Q design is about coffeehouse appeal. But making a laptop that can move nimbly from a round of Apex Legends to a quick PowerPoint presentation without awkward conversations about being a gamer isn't as easy as it sounds.
Laptops, gaming laptops in particular, are one of the most complex design challenges in modern computing. If you think about it, a gaming laptop has to balance a ton of factors. They have to balance weight constraints, thermal constraints, noise constraints, performance constraints, and notably cost constraints.
So let me break this down for you on how hard it is to engineer a gaming laptop. Let's say you have a gaming laptop and you want it to run faster. Well, that means it's gonna get hotter, which means you're gonna need more fans, which means the fans are gonna get louder, which means you can't sit on your couch watching TV while playing with the laptop because it's gonna be too loud, which means, okay, let's make it thicker so that we can allow more air in. Oh no, now it's way too big. That's complicated.
We saw an explosion in gaming laptops somewhere around 5-6 years ago. Kind of why that is fundamentally boils down into, from my perspective, really the GPU itself got much more efficient.
With graphics cards becoming more efficient, and Max-Q design being adopted by the flashier laptop makers like Alienware and Origin, things are starting to shift. Gaming laptops are getting thinner and more approachable. They're willing to sacrifice power and flash for broader appeal, which means we're gonna see a lot more devices like this pink Razer Blade Stealth, which fits a decent enough graphics card inside something as thin as a MacBook Pro, and a lot fewer of the beasts like the Alienware Area 51M. Gaming laptops are probably gonna start looking like every other laptop. I mean, except for the lighting. Even people who don't call themselves gamers can love some flashy lighting.